Rabiu Kwankwaso to join me as the vice presidential candidate so we can rescue this country.
Yesterday in Abuja, it became official. Peter Obi was formally confirmed as the presidential candidate of the Nigeria Democratic Congress, the NDC. And in his acceptance speech, he stood before delegates, party leaders and INEC officials and named Rabiu Kwankwaso as his running mate. Most people watching this are reacting to that news as a victory for the opposition, and maybe it is. But while everyone is celebrating the announcement of this ticket, almost nobody is asking the harder question: why did these two men need a third party to make this happen? And what does that tell us about the strength of what they are actually building? Because this is not 2023. The stakes are different. The country is worse. And if you think this ticket automatically means Tinubu is in trouble, stay with me. Because what I found when I looked closely at the details of this arrangement changes the picture significantly. Before we continue, if you're new here, subscribe to the channel. Every video you watch here is researched, verified, and carefully put together so you get facts, not propaganda. So if you value that kind of content, hit subscribe now. It really helps the channel. Alright, let's get into this. The convention that made this official took place on Saturday, the 30th of May, 2026. The NDC held its special convention in Abuja, and the proceedings were witnessed by officials of the Independent Electoral Commission, INEC. Peter Obi arrived at the venue alongside NDC National Chairman Seriake Dickson and Kwankwaso himself. That image, three men walking in together, told you everything before a single vote was cast. The motion to affirm Obi's candidacy was moved by Senator Victor Ume, who represents Anambra Central, and seconded by former Deputy Senate President Ovie Omoageje. The NDC national leader, Seriake Dickson, former governor of Bayelsa State, handed Obi the party's flag. And in that acceptance speech, Obi declared that Nigeria was standing at a dangerous crossroads. He said the country was, in his words, enveloped in uncertainty. He told the crowd that families are anxious about their safety, that parents are worried for their children's futures, that talented Nigerian youths are increasingly questioning whether they have a future in their own homeland. He said businesses are struggling, communities are suffering, and an alarming number of citizens have lost faith in the very concept of governance. Those are not empty words. They are a description of a country that has spent 2 years under a fuel subsidy removal policy that sent petrol prices spiraling, a naira that collapsed and has not recovered, and a security situation that has only deteriorated. Nigeria's inflation rate hit 15.69% in April 2026, the highest since last November, driven largely by food prices, which rose 16% year-on-year. For context, in April 2026, the cost of staples, millet, garri, yam, beef, and pepper rose sharply for the third consecutive month. Transportation costs rose 16%, linked directly to the fuel price shock triggered by the Middle East conflict that hit global oil markets in March. That is the Nigeria Obi was describing. That is the Nigeria he is now campaigning to lead. And then came the moment the room had been waiting for. Obi announced Kwankwaso as his running mate. That announcement sealed an alliance months in the making, and it is now the most consequential development in Nigerian opposition politics since the 2023 election. But to understand what this alliance actually means and why it matters that it required a third party to house it, you need to understand how it arrived here. Both Peter Obi and Rabiu Kwankwaso joined the African Democratic Congress, the ADC, in July 2025. They did so as part of a broader opposition coalition that included former Vice President Atiku Abubakar, who had left the PDP. The stated goal was to build a unified opposition capable of defeating the APC in 2027. For several months, the arrangement looked workable. There was momentum. There were joint press conferences. There was optimism. Then it began to fracture. The reported reasons include internal divisions, legal disputes affecting the party, disagreements over zoning arrangements, and a fundamental contest between Obi's network and Atiku's PDP structure over who would control the coalition's direction. Those tensions were never resolved. 2 days before the NDC convention on Wednesday, the 27th of May, Atiku Abubakar was declared the winner of the NDC presidential primary, polling over 1.8 million votes. His closest rival, former Rivers State Governor Rotimi Amechi, polled just over 500,000 votes. Atiku had the ticket, and with that result confirmed, Obi's path inside the ADC was closed. He and Kwankwaso left and moved to the NDC, the Nigeria Democratic Congress, bringing their supporters with them. This is the part the celebrations are skipping over. The NDC is not where Obi and Kwankwaso wanted to be. It is where they ended up after the ADC arrangement collapsed. That does not make the ticket less real. It does make the foundation more complicated than the press release suggests. Now let me show you something that most analysts are not talking about. Before the NDC convention happened, INEC officials were present in the hall to observe the proceedings. That matters for a specific legal reason. Under the Electoral Act 2022, specifically Section 84, parties are required to conduct their primaries and conventions in compliance with defined procedures. Delegate composition must meet requirements, convention processes must be documented. The presence of INEC observers is not decoration, it is the mechanism by which a convention becomes legally defensible if and when it is challenged in court. And it will be challenged. Pre-election litigation is now a standard feature of Nigerian electoral politics. Any legal challenge to the NDC convention, whether from within the party or from outside, will come through this provision. If the process was clean, the ticket stands. If there are procedural gaps, opponents will find them. INEC's 2027 timetable has not been publicly finalized for all candidacy deadlines, but formal submission requirements for the presidential and vice presidential nomination forms will apply. The question of whether Kwankwaso's nomination paperwork has been formally submitted through the NDC's party constitutional process, not just announced in an acceptance speech, is a detail that must be confirmed before the channel reports it as fully settled. What we know definitively is this: Peter Obi emerged as the sole aspirant for the NDC presidential ticket in the primary election held on Friday, the 29th of May. 24 hours later, he was ratified at the special convention. The motion was moved, seconded, and passed. INEC watched. The flag was handed over. The announcement was made. That is the legal and procedural record as of this morning. Now let's talk about what this ticket is actually made of and what it needs to become to win. I want to tell you something early on. The person who benefits most from this alliance in the short term is not who you think. I will come back to that. But first, let me show you how the map looks. Peter Obi ran as the Labour Party candidate in 2023. He secured approximately 6.1 million votes, the third largest total of any candidate in that election. His base was concentrated in the southeast, in Lagos, in Abuja, and across urban youth demographics nationally. The Obedient Movement, that loose but energetic coalition of young, educated and online Nigerians, gave his 2023 campaign a visibility and reach that no presidential challenger in Nigeria's modern history had achieved without a major party structure behind them. His governance record in Anambra, particularly on internally generated revenue and security, gave him a credibility argument that differentiated him from career politicians.
His structural weakness is real. He is thin in the northwest, the northeast, and parts of the south-south. Without northern votes, he cannot win a national presidential election. This is the gap that Kwankwaso is supposed to fill. Rabiu Kwankwaso ran in 2023 under the new Nigerian People's Party, the NNPP. He secured approximately 1.5 million votes, and the overwhelming majority of those votes came from one state, Kano. Kano is the single most vote-rich state in Nigeria, and the Kwankwasiya movement, the disciplined, loyalty-driven ward-level political machine that Kwankwaso has built over 2 decades, is the most organized political movement in northern Nigeria outside the APC itself. When Kwankwasiya moves, Kano moves. That is not hyperbole. That is what the 2023 result demonstrated. Kwankwaso's weakness is the mirror image of Obi's, near-zero national penetration outside Kano and selected northwest states. A man who receives 1.5 million votes from one state is formidable locally and irrelevant nationally, unless he's on a joint ticket. This is why both men needed each other, and this is why the alliance makes strategic sense even if the vehicle that houses it is imperfect. But let us be honest about the Kwankwaso calculation, because it is the most revealing thing about this entire arrangement. Before accepting the VP slot, Kwankwaso said publicly, on record, that he is bigger than Peter Obi. He said he is Obi's elder brother. He said he performed better as a governor. He said he holds a PhD. He said all of this while indicating he had no problem accepting the running mate position provided certain conditions were met. That statement was not ego. It was a negotiating position, and it tells you exactly what Kwankwaso traded this arrangement for. He accepted a step down in formal status because his strategist ran the numbers and concluded that this path, VP in 2027, followed by the presidency in 2031, is the most viable route to the position he actually wants. He is not deputizing Peter Obi. He is investing in Peter Obi. There is a difference. Kwankwaso himself made this clearest when he spoke at the NDC party's Kano State Candidate Affirmation event on Friday, the day before the Abuja convention. He told the crowd directly, "I'm talking about Peter Obi. He will be flying our flag, and by the grace of God, on May 29th, exactly 1 year from now, he will have been sworn in as the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria." That is not the language of a man who feels diminished. That is the language of a man who believes he is on the winning side of a calculated bet. Now, who loses from this, and what will they do about it? Atiku Abubakar is the most immediate casualty. With Obi and Kwankwaso gone, the ADC ticket loses 2 of the 3 names that gave the original coalition its credibility. Atiku now runs without the southeast voter base that Obi commands and without Kano's machine infrastructure. His response will likely be to accelerate outreach to APC governors who are dissatisfied with Tinubu's second-term agenda and to attempt to absorb whatever remains of the PDP network that followed him into the ADC. Whether that is enough to mount a serious national challenge is a separate question. The Tinubu administration's response has already been framed. The attack line is platform jumping. The APC has positioned Obi's movement from Labour Party in 2023 to ADC in 2025 to NDC in 2026 as evidence of opportunism and structural weakness. It is a legitimate political vulnerability. But here is the counter that Obi's team will deploy, and it is an effective one. Tinubu himself crossed multiple parties before arriving at the APC. The man who benefited from the APC's structural consolidation in 2015 cannot credibly accuse an opponent of platform mobility. If Obi's communications team deploys that argument efficiently, and they should, the attack loses its sting. The deeper question for the APC is not the messaging war. It is the map. Here is what the NDC ticket needs to win, precisely stated. It needs Kano, and Kwankwasiya must deliver its 2023 block intact under a new party banner. That is not guaranteed. The APC will apply pressure at the state level. There will be attempts to peel off ward-level Kwankwasiya agents with patronage. The test is whether 20 years of loyalty to Kwankwaso as a person translates to loyalty to an NDC ballot paper, because for many of those voters, the party has never been the point. It needs the Southeast, Anambra, Enugu, Imo, Abia, and Ebonyi, to perform at 2023 levels or better. If the Southeast follows the pattern it set with Labour Party vote, that is near certain. But it requires the NDC to build credible state structures in those 5 states quickly. It needs Lagos, where Obi's urban youth base performed in 2023 against Tinubu on his own home ground. This remains contested, but it is in play. It needs the South-South. Seriaka Dixon as NDC chairman brings Bayelsa. But Rivers, Delta and Edo are not yet NDC territory. That gap needs to be addressed directly before December 2026.
And it needs the North Central. Obi outperformed expectations in the Middle Belt in 2023. Security grievances in Plateau, Benue and Nasarawa states are at boiling point. The Global Terrorism Index 2026, released by the Institute for Economics and Peace, ranked Nigeria as the fourth most terrorism-affected country in the world, behind only Pakistan, Burkina Faso and Niger. Terrorism-related deaths in Nigeria rose by 46% from 513 in 2024 to 750 in 2025. Borno State alone accounted for 67% of all attacks and 72% of all deaths. Civilians made up 67% of those killed. That is not a statistic about Borno alone. That is a statistic about a failure of a national government to protect its people. In the Middle Belt, where farming communities have been devastated by banditry and intercommunal violence for years, those numbers are felt personally. The NDC ticket has a ready-made security argument, but only if it shows up with a specific security plan, not just a condemnation of the status quo. Obi's acceptance speech addressed this directly. He noted Nigeria's deteriorating security ranking, fourth in the Global Terrorism Index 2026, having been sixth in 2024 and eighth in 2022. He said that no nation can thrive while its citizens live in fear. He vowed security reforms as a first-term priority. Those are the right words. The question is whether they will be backed by a credible policy framework before the campaign reaches full intensity. Before we go further, drop your thoughts in the comments. Are you shocked by this, or are the pieces finally starting to connect for you? If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now, because what comes next changes the whole picture. Hit like so more Nigerians can see this analysis. Alright, here is where things get serious. Let me go back to what I told you earlier, that the short-term beneficiary of this alliance is not who you think. Here is the uncomfortable truth. The primary short-term beneficiary of the NDC formation is not Peter Obi, it is not Kwankwaso, it is Bola Tinubu's APC. Here's why. In 2027, Nigeria will go to the presidential ballot with at least two credible opposition tickets, Obi on the NDC, Atiku on the ADC. Two opposition candidates splitting the anti-Tinubu vote is not a new problem. It is the exact same structural failure that allowed Tinubu to win in 2023. In that election, Obi got 6.1 million, Kwankwaso got 1.5 million, Atiku got approximately 6.9 million. Together, those three men got more than 14 million votes. Tinubu won with 8.7 million. The margin was always there. The question that nobody wants to answer honestly is, will the same voters who came out in 2023 still be motivated in 2027 after 4 years of watching Nigerian politics deliver disappointment and after the specific betrayal many obedient movement members felt when the 2023 outcome was disputed and the courts upheld it? Voter demobilization is a real risk. The NDC needs an answer for it that goes beyond the excitement of a convention in Abuja. Let us talk about what this means for the country beyond the campaign trail. Nigeria's economy is not recovering. Inflation rose again in April 2026 to 15.69%, the highest in 7 months. Food inflation hit 16.06%, driven by price increases across key staples: millet, yam, garri, beef, ginger, pepper. Transportation costs are up 16%, directly linked to the fuel price shock that followed the Middle East conflict in March. For the trader in Onitsha, the farmer in Katsina, and the student in Lagos, these are not percentages, these are decisions about whether the family eats adequately this week. The power sector is in a structural crisis. Nigeria's grid output in April 2026 was approximately 4,300 megawatts for a country of more than 220 million people. South Africa generates over 48,000 megawatts for 60 million.
Egypt has nearly 60,000 megawatts of installed capacity for 110 million. The Nigerian grid collapsed 12 times in 2024 alone. The power sector owed generation companies 6.8 trillion naira as of February 2026, growing by 200 billion naira every single month. The government approved 4 trillion naira in bonds to address the problem. Obi, in his acceptance speech, made a specific pledge, a minimum increase of 10,000 megawatts in generation and distribution capacity within 4 years. That is the right benchmark. Whether his economic plan explains how to fund that investment, given Nigeria's current fiscal constraints, is the question his campaign must answer before the election. He also addressed unemployment with more precision than most politicians allow themselves. He said the official unemployment rate of 4% grossly misrepresents reality, and he is correct. Real underemployment and unemployment in Nigeria exceeds 30%. Youth unemployment sits above 40%, among the highest in the world. He pledged targeted support for micro, small and medium enterprises through tax incentives and sectoral investment. Again, the right framing. The policy detail must follow. On healthcare, Obi said Nigeria ranks 157th globally. He said only 10 to 20% of its total 30,000 primary healthcare centers are operational. He pledged that within 4 years, his administration would raise healthcare spending to at least 10% of GDP from below 5%, ensure functional primary healthcare centers in all 8,809 wards nationwide, and restore at least half of those 30,000 facilities to full operation. Healthcare spending at 10% of GDP would be a structural transformation for Nigeria, and it's the kind of specific, measurable commitment that gives voters something to hold a candidate to. If those numbers are in Obi's formal manifesto, they represent the most detailed policy commitment made by any Nigerian presidential candidate in recent memory. The broader national stakes are this: a credible opposition campaign, one with real ward-level infrastructure, a clear manifesto, and an INEC monitoring operation, can do two things simultaneously. It can challenge for power, and it can raise the cost of rigging. Both of those things matter for Nigerian democracy, regardless of who wins. The threat of a genuinely competitive 2027 race is already pushing internal conversations inside the APC about Tinubu's second-term positioning. Any governor who fears losing in 2027 under the APC banner has already begun calculating whether private conversations with NDC intermediaries are worth the risk. That pressure is real, even if it is not yet visible. And the risk of violence must be named directly. Nigeria's history of election period insecurity is well documented. A tightly contested presidential race, particularly one where Kano is a major battleground, raises the potential for politically motivated conflict. Security agencies must be watched for signs of political deployment. The NDC's ticket cannot campaign credibly on security while ignoring the security environment of the election itself.
There is an international dimension to this that serious observers will already recognize. Nigeria's 2027 election result will have direct consequences for ECOWAS, the economic community of West African states, and for the democratic norms of the entire West African region. The Sahel has become the global epicenter of terrorism, according to the same Global Terrorism Index that ranked Nigeria 4th in the world. Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, these are countries where military coups have replaced electoral democracy in recent years. Nigeria is the anchor of West African stability. A credibly contested, transparently conducted Nigerian presidential election strengthens the entire regional democratic project. A disputed result, regardless of who wins, hands ammunition to every military figure in the Sahel who argues that elections cannot deliver legitimate government. The obedient movement's most organized infrastructure outside Nigeria is in the United Kingdom, the United States, and Canada. The diaspora was critical to the 2023 Labour Party campaign, not in votes, which Nigerians abroad cannot cast, but in monitoring, legal support, international media coverage, and fundraising. The NDC gives that diaspora network a clearer rallying point than the fragmented post-2023 Labour Party landscape offered. Whether that energy can be maintained over the full campaign horizon is a genuine question. The period between now and February 2027 is long. Political fatigue is real.
Western governments, the US State Department, UK Foreign Office, EU election observation missions have all previously expressed concern about Nigerian electoral integrity. None have commented specifically on the NDC ticket. Watch for any statements that emerge around INEC's formal timetable publication for 2027. The international community's willingness to engage Nigerian electoral concerns publicly is itself a form of pressure on the process. Now, let me address the arguments being made against this ticket, fairly and then completely. The government's line is platform jumping. The ACP's argument is that a man who ran on Labour in 2023, joined the ADC in 2025, and is now the NDC candidate in 2026 has no ideological grounding. Stated fairly, that argument has weight. Nigerian voters are entitled to ask whether the party matters or whether it is merely a vehicle for personal ambition. Parties represent structures, organizations, internal democracies, however imperfect. When a candidate treats party membership as a transactional arrangement to be entered and exited according to political convenience, it raises legitimate questions about what governance under that candidate would look like. Now, dismantle it. The ACP's founding was itself a product of exactly this kind of transactional coalition building. The party that brought Buhari to power in 2015 was assembled from the merger of 4 separate parties, driven not by ideological coherence but by the shared goal of defeating the PDP. Tinubu himself has crossed political lines multiple times across his career. If the ACP wants to run the platform-jumping argument, it must run it against its own history simultaneously. That is not a defense of Obi's party mobility. It is a statement that Nigerian political culture, including the ACP's own formation, has never treated party loyalty as a fixed principle. Obi's team should make this point calmly, with evidence, and then move on to the substance. The strongest argument in favor of the NDC ticket is the one supporters keep reaching for, and it is genuinely powerful. In 2023, Obi and Kwankwaso together got more than 7.5 million votes while running against each other. On a single ticket, their combined base should translate to a formidable challenge. The Southeast Firewall, the Kano Machine, and the National Youth Engagement represent the most theoretically viable opposition coalition Nigeria has assembled since the ACP coalition defeated Jonathan in 2015.
Here is where that argument breaks down. It assumes 2023 vote totals transfer to 2027 without attrition. They almost certainly will not. Voter disengagement following the 2023 outcome and the Supreme Court's affirmation of the Tinubu victory has been significant in the obedient community. Labour Party's 2023 grassroots energy was built around a specific LP brand, not around Obi alone. That brand is now orphaned, and the critical uncertainty nobody can yet answer is whether Kwankwasia's Kano Machine transfers cleanly from the NNPP to the NDC ballot paper. If even 20% of Kwankwaso's 2023 Kano voters stay home or defect to ACP under pressure, the northern pillar of this alliance weakens significantly. There are 3 misconceptions circulating on social media that must be corrected directly. The first is that this is the same as 2023. It is not. The institutional context is fundamentally different. There are now 2 major opposition tickets, NDC and ADC, rather than 3 from 2023. That is an improvement, but 2 is not 1. The fragmentation problem has not been solved. The second is that Kwankwaso accepting the VP position means he has been weakened or sidelined. This misreads the political calculation entirely. Kwankwaso is playing a longer game. The VP position in 2027, if the ticket wins, is the presidency in 2031. He is not conceding position, he is positioning. The third is that the obedient movement will automatically transfer its loyalty to the NDC because Obi is on the ticket. This has not been verified. The LP national chairman has not formally endorsed the NDC candidacy. The relationship between the LP's current leadership and Obi's NDC campaign is unclear. Before recording, check the LP national chairman's position on Obi's exit and whether the party is directing its members toward NDC or maintaining independence.
Let me tell you what I am watching and what you should be watching over the next 12 months. Because everything you heard in today's coverage is about the convention. The real story starts now, and it will be told in places most cameras will never go. The first signal, whether INEC validates the NDC convention proceedings without legal challenge in the next 30 days. If the process was clean, the ticket stands. If procedural questions emerge, and they may, the legal fight begins early. The second signal, whether Kwankwasia formally registers its members under the NDC banner at ward level in Kano. Not press releases, not endorsement statements, actual ward agent lists, confirmed membership transfers, local government structures. If that happens by September 2026, the northern pillar of this ticket is real. If it does not happen, or if the numbers are thin, the Kano block is softer than it appears. The third signal, whether Obi publishes a formal economic manifesto before December 2026. His acceptance speech contained policy pledges on power, healthcare, unemployment, corruption, but a speech is not a manifesto. The 2023 Labour Party campaign was criticized for the absence of detailed policy specifics. If the NDC campaign repeats that pattern, the ACP will fill the vacuum with its own narrative.
The fourth signal, whether any prominent Southeast or South-South figures, APGA leadership, Edo or Delta governors, River State structures, formally aligned with the NDC. The South-South is the gap in this ticket's current geography. Filling it requires concrete political work, not assumption. My prediction, and I am putting this on record, Peter Obi will be on the ballot in February 2027 as the NDC presidential candidate. Kwankwaso will be his running mate. This ticket will hold, not because the alliance is perfectly constructed, but because both men have exhausted their alternatives and they know it. The real variable is infrastructure, not identity. Whether the NDC can build functional ward-level structures in the 24 months between today and the election will determine whether this coalition is a competitive challenger or a well-publicized opposition campaign that underperforms its potential. Come back and tell me if I was right. I started this video with a question. Why did these two men need a third party to make this happen? And what does that tell us about what they are building? Here is my answer. They needed a new platform because neither the Labour Party nor the NNPP could contain a joint ticket without destroying the other party's institutional identity. Obi could not come to NNPP. It would look like surrender to Kwankwaso's structure. Kwankwaso could not come to LP. It would look like he was subordinating the Kwankwasia movement to the obedient brand. The NDC is a neutral vehicle. It is not a movement born from ideological clarity. It is a platform built from political necessity. And there is no shame in that. Nigeria's most consequential opposition coalitions have always been assembled from necessity rather than ideology. The APC itself, the coalition that ended 16 years of PDP rule in 2015, was built exactly this way. What separates the coalitions that hold from the ones that collapse is not the press conference. It is not the convention hall. It is not the endorsement speech or the flag ceremony or the trending hashtag. It is what happens at the ward level 3 months from now when the cameras are gone and the hard organizational work begins. Watch the wards, not the speeches. Here's what I want you to tell me in the comments. Do you trust this alliance to hold until February 2027? And if not, which side do you think breaks first? Drop it below. I read every one of them. That's all for today. I started this channel with one goal: to tell the truth as clearly as possible, even when it's uncomfortable. So when you like, share, and subscribe, you're helping keep that kind of voice alive.